Thank you, and thank you to the conference organisers and to the Liverpool Party for arranging things for us here. 2 days ago, I was looking at my draft speech, and things were starting to come together. I'd got most of the text in place. I knew what the theme was going to be about Greens getting our priorities right. But there was something missing in my draft, something that it wasn't easy to write about. Because, as you probably know, there's been a lot happening in Norwich recently, and it's not all been good. We're in a strong position politically, but we've been suffering personal tragedy among our activists. And as many of you know, on the 21st of January, Gail O'Donovan passed away unexpectedly. Now, many of you know Gail through her work on the National Party executive, through her time as a key activist in Manchester, and more recently in Norwich. And at just 31, she was a bright, powerful light in our party. Someone who inspired us, who challenged us, who laughed with us, and who was like family to us. And after my speech, Anne Power from Manchester is going to give a tribute to Gail's life. But before I start my speech properly, I'd like to invite you to join me in a minute's silence in memory of Gail, to reflect on our common purpose and the things that we worked on with her. So if you can, please could you stand and join me in a minute's silence for Gail O'Donovan. Conference, I'm pleased that we're meeting here in Liverpool, because this city is the home of a thriving local Green Party. We have two councillors here, Sarah Jennings and John Coyne, who've been making a positive difference, bringing sensible green policies to the table at City Hall. Take, for example, their proposal for 20-mile-per-hour speed limits on residential streets, which have been adopted by the council. This will make the city's streets safer for everyone. And our Green councillors have been working hard to give residents a real say in decisions that affect them. And they bring an ethical voice to council decision-making, such as pushing the council to take its pension investments out of arms companies. In Liverpool, as in so much of the country, the Green Party offers a voice to voters who see the bigger picture, who see that the other parties haven't got their priorities right. Green voters want to put social and environmental justice at the heart of decision-making. And in Liverpool, as in so much of the country, more voters are switching to us. 2 councillors elected in recent years, second place in 2 wards, and a doubling of the party's membership in this city over the last 4 years. To our councillors and our party members in Liverpool, I say, keep up the good work and let's build on these solid foundations across Merseyside. When we last met in Sheffield, I warned of the impact of the savage cuts that this government is making to our public services. The sort of cuts which our councillors in Liverpool tried to stop with an alternative budget plan. Cuts that threaten the fundamental principles of our welfare state. Cuts that trade short-term financial gain for long-term social and economic pain. Take social care services. Up and down the country, we're seeing services being axed. Some councils are making it harder to access care services. Some are closing daycare centres, and others are cutting the support services that help older and disabled people remain independent in their own homes. These cuts are putting staff under immense pressure and leaving many older people isolated. For the workforce and the people they serve, this is a recipe for disaster. If people don't get the social care they need early on, then their circumstances deteriorate and they end up needing more care from the NHS. And it's a similar story with mental health. The charity Mind has reviewed mental health services across the country and found that it's already difficult for people to access services. In many areas, patients do not get the type of care they need. Staff are already overstretched. And as jobs are cut, those that are left have more patients to look after with fewer resources. When they face impossible decisions prioritising between the most vulnerable, it's inevitable that people will suffer. Early support helps people recover, but delay in access to services makes treatment harder. The cuts proposed to mental health services will make things much worse, for patients, for their carers, for relatives and friends, for staff and for society as a whole. It's simply unacceptable for the government to be cutting services that support vulnerable people. It's the same story again with youth services. cuts intended for short-term gain that leave a legacy of long-term problems. Youth centres and support for vulnerable young people are being cut back in many council areas and removed entirely in some parts of the country. Yet we know that providing the support and activities that young people need makes a crucial difference to their life chances. Now, if you believe David Cameron's big society rhetoric, then you'd expect to see armies of qualified volunteers everywhere, with plenty of their own time and money ready to fill in the gaps. And of course, there are people who give their time and money to build a better world. But surely the delivery of crucial services should not be left to chance. Make no mistake, this move away from public delivery isn't about giving people more of a say in how their services are run, but a thinly veiled attack on our welfare state. It's not a big vision of a caring society. It's a cheap vision of a cruel society. It's a classic case of this Conservative Lib Dem government just not getting its priorities right. Instead of cutting tax evasion by those with the most, the big companies and the super rich, they're cutting social care services for those with the least, the elderly and those who cannot look after themselves. Instead of bringing down bankers' bonuses, they've been letting down mental health services. Instead of taxing currency speculation, they're axing youth services. And the consequences are rising unemployment, unmet care needs, and a society where the only big thing is the rising gap between rich and poor. And we say to David Cameron and Nick Clegg, we see through your rhetoric. We see you protecting the wealthy while slashing the services that the rest of us rely on. We see that you've not got your priorities right, and the Green Party has. And unlike you, we lead by example. When we see a problem, we try to solve it. That's why it takes a Green MP, our Caroline Lucas, to put forward legislation in Parliament to clamp down on corporate tax dodging. We could bring in £80 billion per year of additional tax that goes unpaid, enough to save all the public services that were cut last year. When we see a need, we try to meet it. That's why Green councillors are doing everything within their power to protect public services from cuts and privatisation. In Malvern, our Green councillors joined with a local group of residents to protect a youth centre that was under threat. And in Lancaster, Green Cabinet members have raised money to protect services by making huge energy efficiency savings in heating the city sports centre. When Greens have a choice, they cut bills, not jobs. When faced with a difficult challenge, we stick to our priorities. That's why Green councillors in Brighton and Hove put forward a budget that protects all social care and youth services. Faced with huge cuts from central government, Green councillors proposed a modest rise in council tax to protect services. But they were met with an unholy coalition of Labour and Tory councillors determined to take the pickles bribe and store up cuts for the future. It's Green councillors who are challenging the government's slash-and-burn approach and working with local communities to save our services. We get our priorities right. And while this government is squeezing council spending, it's also putting public services in the hands of greedy private companies at every opportunity. Take the proposals for the NHS. This government is continuing where Labour left off and privatising more and more of our health services. The health bill isn't about doctors managing cooperative health services run in the public interest. It's about a few select clinicians commissioning services from private companies that are competing to extract more profit from the public purse. It's complex, it's unwieldy, it's disruptive, and it's a mess. Don't take my word for it. Listen to the Royal College of General Practitioners, the Royal College of Nursing, the Royal College of Midwives, and the British Medical Association. These and more are all advising the government to stop. But the government still won't listen, at least not to anyone who says what they don't want to hear. Snubbing the largest professional bodies in medicine and nursing underlines the arrogance of the government's approach. Cameron says that he's just continuing on the path that Labour was on, and that may be true. But it's no excuse. Labour's PFI and privatisation of cleaning services were a disaster, and they leave the so-called opposition with no credibility when it speaks against the Conservative brand of privatisation. That's why we need people to know that there is a party with a different approach, a party that believes that the NHS should be about health promotion for all, not just wealth promotion for a few. A party believes that our doctors and nurses should be able to focus on managing patient care, not profit margins. A party that believes the NHS should be publicly funded and publicly run. We are that party, and we will keep fighting to protect the founding principles of the NHS. Conference, it's not just in our public services that corporate interests are winning out. The government's love affair with big business is all too apparent in its planning changes. This is a government that wants to give developers a free rein to build over our countryside. The Conservative Lib Dem proposals for the National Planning Policy Framework include a presumption in favour of building plans, a default yes to concreting over the countryside. Of course, they've tried to put a green gloss on it by prefixing it with the word sustainable. But they've not given a definition of sustainable development. It looks like what they're talking about is a mandate to keep on building supermarkets and car parks over cherished landscapes, keep on driving motorways through protective wildlife sites, and choking up the green belt with urban sprawl. The Chancellor claims that this will help the economy, that opening up the countryside to this corporate vandalism will boost growth. Just how long will it take for short-sighted politicians like Osborne to wake up to the value of our natural environment? How long will it take them to ditch a worldview that only recognises the value of things with a price tag? Mr. Osborne, our natural environment is not a luxury. It's not an optional commodity to be flogged off when times get tough. It's the fabric of our society, the source of our food, our water, and our well-being. You can't put a price on the beauty of our countryside, its worth to our wildlife, or its heritage value. But even if you are blind to this, there are strong economic benefits to protecting the countryside. Tourism in the English countryside alone brings in over £10 billion to local economies every year. Osborne claims that his proposals would speed up the planning process. But a study by the Campaign to Protect Rural England, the National Trust and the RSPB says that making it easier to develop the countryside is unlikely to have any positive effect on employment or on the economy. The plans also contradict the government's own localism agenda by making it harder for local communities to reject planning applications. We do need reform of the planning system, but certainly not in the direction mapped out by Osborne. We need a planning system that secures long-term well-being, not short-term profits. We need a planning system that brings empty properties back into use and provides affordable housing for those who need it. We need a planning system that ensures local shops, services and jobs are provided where people live, where affordable public transport and local services reduce the need for car travel, where development takes place within the capacity of the local environment. We need a planning framework that protects the most precious aspects of our land and heritage, not a developer's license to bulldoze our countryside in a reckless grab for growth at any cost. As Greens, we have a different vision for our economy, one where economic success is not defined by GDP, but where we place real value on protecting the natural environment, reducing inequality, and promoting health and well-being. One where we have a more even distribution of wealth and working hours. One where we focus more on meeting people's real needs and less on the City of London. As Greens, we bring a different but essential perspective to the debate about our economy. We want to put our economy on a genuinely sustainable footing. That's not about cuts to public services that put people out of work and increase the gap between rich and poor. But neither is it about taking the economy back to where it was before the credit crunch. We want to see investment in a new type of economy for the future. Investment in renewable energy and energy efficiency measures that will help meet our future needs, keep fuel bills down and tackle climate change. Investment in a first-class public transport system. Investment in apprenticeships for green industries and local manufacturing. For an economy where we produce far more of the goods we need far closer to home. The vision of Labour, the Lib Dems and the Tories of more global free trade and a domestic economy reliant on the financial sector has failed us. It's resulted in increasing levels of inequality at home and abroad, the erosion of manufacturing jobs in the UK and increased carbon emissions from long-distance trading. In a world facing peak oil production, neoliberal policies for more free trade leave our society exposed. That's why the green vision for our economy is so crucial. We know that a successful, stable economy is not about adding to the pockets of rich financiers and transnational corporations, but about meeting the basic needs of people around the world and living within the natural means of the planet. On the economy, Greens have our priorities right.